Welcome to the Father Focus podcast.
Father Focus. Check.
Why are we talking about this? Why does it matter?
So shaping your kids into powerful people.
Bro, let that brother fly. Check. All right, let's go.
You ready?
All right, let's go. I'm with myself.
Well, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Father Focus podcast. Wherever you are listening, man, we are so honored and thrilled that you're here hanging out with us. I'm here with my co-host, Jermaine. What's up, Jermaine?
What's up, man? Glad to be here.
Man, dude,
Super
I am
excited.
so excited about our podcast today. I feel like we're batting a little bit outside of our weight class, you know? I mean, we got a legend with us today, and I think it's going to be a killer conversation. So, dads, if you're out there, I think this is going to really help you level up your game. So I would say if you have a notepad, get ready, because I think we're going to drop some bombs on you in a really good way today. So I'm so excited about our guest, Jermaine. He's been a friend of mine for the last year or so, and just so encouraging. We actually brought him into our church last year for a conference, and he knocked it apart on like 95% of his sessions, you know, like just killed it. And so I'm just so excited. We have my friend Seth Dahl on the episode with us today. Seth, what's up, bro?
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me. I like this.
Yeah, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. My
Looking
kids just
good,
all
man. Looking
left the
good.
house. Thank
Awesome.
you. They just left to go to gymnastics tonight, so I'm home alone for a little bit this afternoon.
Hey, that's awesome. You got to steal away those moments as a dad for sure.
Yeah.
So Seth, I'm sure some people are already familiar with you, and some, you know, maybe this is the first time they're hearing you, but can you kind of give a little like background on you, like personally, tell us about like your family and, you know, your life, and then kind of what you're working on, and, you know, just kind of snapshot of who you are.
Yeah. Real fast, I grew up without a dad in my home for the first 9 years of my life. Then my mom got remarried, you know, so there was a lot of, just all the stuff that comes with divorce and single parent. Became a drug addict at about 21. That was a while ago. So became a drug addict, started with weed, went to coke, meth, ecstasy real fast, and just went downhill quite crazy until Jesus came in and gave me what I call it the one-step program. He stepped into my life and everything else stepped out. And so I was instantly delivered from drugs and addiction. And, you know, somewhere in that night, I told him I wanted to help kids. I didn't premeditate that. I didn't think about that. It just came out of my mouth. I told him, I said, if you get me out of this, I will help kids not go down the path I went down. And so before I knew it, I'm helping my friend in his youth group. And then I end up going to an internship in New York City, working with kids. We minister to 20,000 kids every single week. At Christmas time, we ministered to 60,000 kids a week. We had 17 teams doing 17 services simultaneously 5 days a week. And each team would often do 3 services a day. So I would, you know, each team was speaking probably 14, 15 times a week and just reaching lots of kids. And then I moved to Redding, California, and became children's pastor, children's director at Bethel Church for 10 years, and got to travel the world, really, and speak to children's pastors, children's teams. You know, started having my own kids shortly there after moving to Redding. But at one point, God started to tell me, He said, Seth, you've been flying all over the world, helping children's pastors and children's ministries, and you've missed the most important pastors of all, the parents. And so I started to move more towards family, more towards parents. You know, I know deep inside my call is to children, and what better way to reach children the deepest than to get in their homes and get in their families and help their parents. So, you know, helping a kid in church is really good, but it's an hour and a half a week rather than 24/7 in a home if the parents are influenced. And so, you know, the last few years been really aiming more towards family, more towards parents in that direction. So yeah, right now I've been in the process of building spirit-led families I think I started to realize probably 14 years ago that a lot of what I knew about God wasn't true. It was religion, not God. And so I started to realize too in the last few years specifically, like, wow, we want to be following the Spirit. That's the great privilege of being God's children, is that we get to follow the Holy Spirit. We get to be led by the Holy Spirit. Those who are children of God are led by the Holy Spirit. What an honor, what a privilege. But unfortunately, many people, many believers aren't led by the Spirit. They're just pushed around by religion. And so, I've seen that with families and parents, especially because we want to do a good job raising our kids. The culture's crazy. We want our kids, we want our kids to grow up and walk with God. And so we have a tendency, though, to sometimes allow religion in. And so that's kind of the focus now. I'm working the next 2 months. I'm certifying a bunch of coaches underneath me, and we'll do Spirit-led parents coaching. I've been doing coaching for a long time now, but I'm going to start certifying coaches and have, I got a child psychologist coming up under me. I got a few people that have adopted and fostered and stuff like that. So we're going to try to just serve a lot of people and a lot of different types of parents who are believers but want to grow as parents. And so, yeah, that's what I've been working on lately, is that Spirit-led families, Spirit-led parents.
That's awesome.
And some Spirit-led kids stuff as well, content for kids. So, yeah, that's kind of the journey in a nutshell.
Yes. And you've been married for a while now, and you
Yeah.
have a few kids, right?
Yep. Married 14 years. We got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And so we also have a cow, a horse, 3
Wow.
dogs, a whole bunch of chickens, and a garden. So we are, and we're homeschooling. So we homeschool. We run 3 businesses. We run a farm, and trying to do all of that well without dying.
Wow.
Yeah, it's busy.
Thank God
It's
for
full,
coffee.
not
Am I
busy.
right?
It's full. I know, right? Thank you, Lord, for coffee.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, dude, I get it, man. I get it. The religion stuff is huge, man. It's such a challenge. I mean, me and Jermaine, probably you too, grew up in the '90s when basically everything was demonic and satanic. So I couldn't even watch Captain Planet. I mean, I'm still going through counseling for all this stuff I wasn't allowed to do, but and I love your heart. Me and my wife read Raising Spirit-Led Kids, one of the first books you wrote, and really did change our parenting. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation today, because I think you carry truly an assignment from heaven to help parents really, really instill identity in their kids, but not from a place of fear, but a place of authority, which is really powerful. Like, it's really helped unlock some things in the way we raise our kids. So, dude, I think this episode is gonna be phenomenal. We're gonna talk about some important stuff, but I have a really serious question I need to ask you, because I know you're a foodie. I know this.
Yeah. Yes.
What's the best meal you've ever had?
Oh, ever? Wow. I think it might have to be in Taipei. There's this fusion restaurant that we go to when we're in Taipei that is just off the charts good. That's probably my favorite. But in Vancouver, Canada, there's this place called Meat and Bread. So it's not like the fanciest place, but they raise their own pork and they bake their own bread, and they're right across from an amazing coffee shop called Revolver. So you go to Revolver and get your coffee, and then you go to Meat and Bread, and you just get this sandwich that is like pork, like a pesto sauce, and then pork cracklings on top. They're so good. You eat one, and you just go back and buy another. So I have a lot of places I really enjoy. That Meat and Bread, I could go there every week for the rest of my life and be just fine. But this restaurant in Taipei, this fusion place, is just quality food.
Wow. Jermaine, have you even heard of Taipei?
No.
I have not.
I mean,
feel so
the place?
uncultured.
The place? Yes, but I've never had, Yeah.
All right.
I've never
Well, I
had the
grew up in
food.
Louisiana. I mean, I don't know much about geography, but I feel so uncultured listening to Seth talk about food.
That's
Oh
all.
man,
That's awesome,
I
man.
like
Yeah,
I
we had
like
bone
traveling
marrow.
places and eating. Oh yeah, we did have bone
Yeah,
marrow when I
yeah,
was there in Detroit.
it was so weird, but after
You
I
had
tried it,
what?
it wasn't. Yeah,
What did you
exactly,
have?
exactly. We had bone marrow. It was
Bone
an
marrow.
interesting, yeah, it was an interesting experience. Listen, if you ever invite Seth into your church, which I think you should do to speak to your parents, let him pick a restaurant, and I guarantee it'll be the cultural experience of your life. Some of the things they order is great. It is great.
Bone
Um,
marrow.
So
so
funny.
switching gears, Seth, because
Yeah,
this podcast is all about raising the standard of what it means to be a father. I think there's been it seems like an intentional goal to kind of suppress the role of a father. Seems like a lot of men
yeah.
don't even know what it means to be a dad. So, trying to reclaim what does it mean to be a biblical father? Like, what is the definition of that? And then, really, what are those like core responsibilities, values, mandates that we have? So, kind of talk to us about that. Like, what does that look like?
I think first of all, my definition of being a biblical father would be to learn who the father really is. So adjusting the untruths and the lies that we believe about the father, and then
Yeah.
working on our like developing ourselves so that Jesus said to the disciples, he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And of course, none of us are Jesus, none of us are ever going to be perfect, that's for sure. But what's the goal? I think the goal would be, I want my kids to look at me and go, when I look at you, Dad, you show me God. When you talk to me, Dad, I hear God. I've been saying this recently. This just hit me actually, like 3 weeks ago, maybe. I've never thought this before, but we all know the statement that the voice we use with our children becomes the inner voice they use with themselves. So that's a pretty common thing in the parenting world, is to go, hey,
Yeah.
the way you talk to your kids becomes the way they talk internally later. And but working with kids over the years, I've been in children's ministry 21 years at this point, and I've seen over and over again, Christian counselors can tell you this, like this is 101 Christian counseling, that children believe that the theology they believe comes from their parents, not from Sunday school. So Sunday school can tell you things like
Yeah.
God loves you, God's there for you, God never leaves you, God's your everlasting Father. But kids have this filter called their parents. Their belief system is the filter of their parents, and everything we tell them about God has to run through that. So you know how many people are like, God never leaves you, never forsakes you. Well, I never feel like God is there. Okay, well, that potentially comes from your your families, your parents, and how they raised you. And so if your dad wasn't present, your mom wasn't present, you're going to have a hard time believing that God's actually there. You're going to have a hard time sensing him if your parents neglected you, weren't there for you, things like that. And so, we as parents need to understand that we are the theology our children will most often believe, no matter what Sunday school teaches them differently. And so that's why we have a lot of people in Christian counseling, because they don't
Yeah.
they don't know God at all. And so all of that to say, I don't think the voice that we use with our kids becomes their internal voice only. I believe the voice that we use, especially fathers, the voice we use with our kids becomes the voice they think is God's in their own heart and in their own head. So the way we talk to them is really important. And the way we talk to them comes from the way we believe he talks about us. That's why I say to simplify the definition, I think it comes down to, I actually have to know him. I have to know him. I think it's my responsibility as a father to know the Father. And then to represent him so well. Of course, again, we're not perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. But represent him so well, my kids can go, you know what? I don't need tons of counseling when it comes to God, because I have a pretty clear picture of God, because that's what my dad did, was work and develop himself to represent God to me, understanding that I am their theology. I am the voice they will hear in their head. And so I think that's it. I think responsibilities, that's a whole, we could probably talk about that for a really long time. I think it's my responsibility to raise, for one, to be the man my daughter wants to marry, the type of man, to be the type of man my boys want to become like, to be a hero to my boys. I think I need to understand healthy masculinity. I think a lot of what we throw out there as toxic masculinity is just nonsense. And I think, so I think responsibility wise, it can go everywhere. Like, love our wives well, get our feed our kids good food, teach them about all of life. I think get them outside, get them around nature, pray with them, pray in front of them, pray with them.
Yeah.
All of it. I think all of it. I think everything we think of becomes our responsibility. I tuck your kids in bed, pray over them, tell them stories, be present, be fully engaged with our kids. I think that's the responsibility of a biblical father, is to fully engage our kids in everything and understand that. I think part of our responsibility is to understand how important our role is and be there, fully engaged with it. Whether that looks like,
Wow.
yeah, in every area of life. I could talk about this for a long time, but I think the more I look at society, and I think potentially we'll get into some of this a little bit, like with culture, but I think as the world goes more and more indoors and behind screens, I think we need to realize God created a garden, and it would be wise to make sure our kids are outside. I think part of our responsibility is to go, we've got a lot of great stuff, but something got us here. Something got us where we are, and if we forget what got us here and we neglect what got us here, everything crumbles. Eventually, everything crumbles. So that's why I'm like, I think part of my responsibility as a parent is like, I want to make sure my kids are not behind screens all the time, and they're outdoors, and they're raising animals, their own animals, and they're playing outside, and they're not sitting there behind screens all day. They're not staying indoors all day. They're not eating garbage all the time. I want to raise healthy kids in every area of life, and so I think yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
We
yeah.
could, we could discuss all of that, but that's some of my
No,
thoughts.
and I think, I mean, for parents that live in the city, maybe it's time to get a herd of cats, and just start raising them
Raising
to.
cats.
But I think there is a lot of value in what you're saying. I mean, just that list is so long of all the things that we should be and could be doing as a dad. But I love what you said. Just start with what you know to do. I think that's a really easy, practical way to start. You know what I mean, Jermaine?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Seth, thank you for that. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier that your dad wasn't in your life. And, you've heard the term parenting out of pain, right? How would you say, like, how do your own wounds as a father affect the way you parent your kids?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll just tell my story a little bit more. Like, I noticed with me, I and this is typical with all of us, like we parent out of pain. So a lot of times what happens is we either repeat the stuff that was done to us or we react to what was done to us. So in my case, I knew enough to go, I want to be there for my children, but I had to watch myself, because in that way I could move into reaction mode, and I could go, you know what? My dad lived in a different state. My dad did not live with us. My dad was not, he wasn't at my soccer games. He wasn't tucking me in bed. He wasn't waking me up in the morning. He wasn't driving me to school. My dad wasn't, didn't even live in the same city. And so a reaction can go, I don't want to repeat that. And so now I never leave the house, or I'm afraid to leave the house, or if I'm not with my kids all the time, then something's going to go wrong. And like, wait, no, that's reaction. Now I'm reacting to what I don't want. I'm not responding to God. And so I think in that case, I think we have to watch that stuff, because our wounds are going to try to affect us. So our wounds are either going to go, repeat me, repeat me, repeat me. Just do exactly what your parents did and don't grow and don't change and don't develop and don't get better and just repeat what you were taught as a child, or react so strongly you actually create a different type of error. Wow. So, for me, it was like, I really struggled when I would travel and stuff. And like, wait a second. It's not that I can't travel. I can travel. I can leave. I can not be there a few nights a month. I cannot be there. But I want to set this up in a healthy way so that I can travel, but then the rest of the time I'm actually really present with my kids. I'm not traveling every weekend. I'm not traveling every week and only home on the weekends. No. I'm fully engaged when I'm home and setting myself up. That way it's like, oh, I'm responding to God and His leading in my life, not reacting to what I didn't have or what I don't want or what my pain is and my wounds are. Wow. And so I think that's, to try to make it quick, I think that's typically what happens. We either repeat or react, and we don't want to do either. We want to respond to God and go, hey, Lord, there's some stuff I do not want to repeat. How do I do this in a way that's healthy and looks like you? And I don't actually want to react and just do the opposite. Some parents are like, well, if I know what was wrong, and this comes down to discipline and all that stuff. Like, some kids were spanked for everything. So they grow up and they're like, they react and they go, well, I don't want to spank. And so they go, well, I'm not going to actually discipline my kids and correct my kids because my parents were so harsh. Like, well, now you create a different error because you're afraid to discipline because you're in so much reaction to what you didn't have. So some people think, I know what's wrong. I know what my parents did was wrong. And so if I'm not wrong, I must be right. I'm like, no, just because you're not wrong doesn't mean you're right. It means you could be doing a different wrong. You could be creating a whole other error. It's like driving a car. If you find yourself off the side of the road, falling asleep, and you're going off into the ditch, if you yank too hard, you're only in the other ditch. You got to get on the road. Like, overreacting doesn't get you on the road, it gets you in the other ditch. And I think that's a trick of the devil. One way to say that is the devil sends errors in pairs. And so he'll send one error and get you to full on go into another error. And you think you're right just because you're not wrong. Like, no, not necessarily. And so, yeah, those two things, like, I don't want to react and I don't want to repeat. But I think too, another thing that's important is to honor our parents. I struggled. I'll just throw this in there quick, rabbit trail. I struggled for a while with my dad. Like, I really struggled. And, because all I could see was the negatives. All I could see was you weren't there. You didn't tuck me in bed. All this. All I could see was what he didn't do. And then one day the Lord just showed me, he's like, hey, Seth, remember when your dad would fly all the way across the country, get off the plane, pick you up, get back on the plane, fly you all the way across the country to spend 2 weeks with him, and he would give you his full attention for 2 weeks and just love on you, and then fly you home, drop you off with your mom, get back on the plane and fly. And he goes, your dad would travel great distances just to be with you and bring you where he was. And he said, your dad showed you me. Your dad was showing you me. He didn't show you me all the time, but in those cases, he showed you me. I traveled great distances to be with you and to bring you where I am. And I was like, oh. And so it really helped me to honor my dad and go, you know what? You did what you could with what you had, and I love you, and I want to honor you, and I want to actually, honor is a powerful force. We are totally on a rabbit trail. But honor is such a powerful force in the spirit realm. Jesus said, if you honor a prophet in the name of a prophet, you receive a prophet's reward. If you honor a righteous man in the name of a righteous man, you receive a righteous man's reward. Honor is a very powerful force. And I can look at my dad now and go, you showed me the Father, maybe not all the time, but there were times you really showed me the Father, and I want to pull that into my life. I want to receive that into my life. But also, on the other end, dishonor is a very powerful force. The way I describe them is like download buttons. You can go on a website and click download, and files will just drop into your computer, and now you can pop up on your screen and see them, and now you own them and have access to them. Like, well, dishonor and honor are download buttons. And so if I can honor my parents, I can download what they did right and what they did good and what they did and showed me God. I can download that into my life, into my heart. But if I only live in dishonor and I only want to react to what I didn't have, what they failed in, what they messed up in, if I just live in that dishonor, I actually start to invite that spiritually into my life. Both of those are very powerful spiritual forces. And so, we don't want to react, we don't want to repeat, but at the same time, we want to go, Lord, where can I honor? Because I don't want to get stuck in that unforgiveness, dishonor, anger, frustration thing, because otherwise I'm just spiritually inviting stuff I don't actually want in my life. So, rabbit trail done for there.
That's
that.
so good. That's so good, man.
It's a good rabbit.
That's so good, yeah. I actually have 2 follow-up questions for you off of what you said, because I actually think that's a God rabbit trail that you went down. I'm just imagining the guy who his dad was never in his life, and maybe he's like new to faith or still developing how to hear the voice of God. I think we all probably parent at some level out of reaction, right? Like there are certain things our parents did we didn't love, so we're like, I want to do the opposite of that. But sometimes it's not easy to recognize the motivations in your heart of why you do things. So I think the first question maybe that guy would ask you is, well, how do I know when I'm parenting out of the heart of God and doing what's healthy? And how can I recognize when I'm parenting out of hurt or pain or fear or insecurity? And then the second question is, how does someone honor their parents if they weren't ever there in the first place? Like they were completely absent, had no relationship with them. So I know those are 2 like heavy questions and very specific, but I think they apply to a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay, so first one, how do I recognize if I'm living in reaction or if I'm
Right.
Yeah. How do I recognize that? I know just from all the parents I've worked with and watching my own life with my own kids as well, it's like a lot of times I think it starts with realizing unless I learn something else, I will probably just have my parents come out of me. And so if there's something I don't want, so I think just being aware of that is the first place to start. To be aware that I'm probably going to have some of this come out of me. I'm probably going to react. Because once you're aware of it, then you can begin to recognize it and see it. Like there's times where I'll say something and I'm like, where did that come from? And I start to look and go, oh, I actually haven't thought about this. I'm just full on in, I don't know how to describe it, like cruise control mode. I'm not intentional here. This is totally unintentional. This is just me in cruise control, letting stuff happen and come out of me, and I'm not listening to myself, and I'm not hearing my own voice, and I'm not paying attention to my own what's coming out of me and what's happening inside me, and so I think that's one way to recognize is first be aware that's going to happen, and second to actually like begin to evaluate stuff like, wow, that tone of voice, where did that come from? Wow, that thing I just said, that phrase, where did that come from? Whoa, I think too, it's good to kind of go through your history. We all have our story. And I think, especially for husbands and wives, like I've talked with so many husbands and wives that they're on totally different pages when it comes to parenting. I was like, guys, why don't you go through your story together, your history together? Here's what my parents did. Here's what I liked. Sorry, there's a helicopter. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't like. And look at them and go, have your wife go through her upbringing, have you go through your upbringing, compare notes, compare that stuff, look at that stuff and actually evaluate it and go, do I see God doing that? Do I see God treating people like that? Maybe, but who was it? Oh, that was the Pharisees. He was treating the Pharisees quite rude. He didn't treat everyone that way. And so I think that's a huge deal, is to go through your story and look at it. Like look at what your parents actually did and evaluate it and line it up with God, and then make some decisions so you can actually be intentional, not autopilot. Autopilot's the word I was looking for. Not just cruise control, like autopilot, like something is flying the plane here, something is leading me, And if I'm not actually intentional, it's
Right.
probably going to be what my parents put in. And so that would be some advice I have for how to recognize. I think anxiety too. If I'm really anxious, I've probably moved away from
That's good.
what God is doing, and I'm more partnering with fear. So that would be one. How to recognize. I think, what was the second one? How do we honor if our parents weren't even there? I think at its core, honor looks like forgiveness, letting things go. You know, one of the most powerful things we can do to release ourselves from the failures of past generations is to forgive them. Like, you know what? I forgive you, Dad. I forgive you, Mom. I forgive that. I forgive them for not being there or for not being in my life at all. And I release that. I release them from that. I release myself from that whole situation. I think that's where honor begins, is to actually truly forgive. It doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean what they did didn't hurt. It doesn't mean what they did was right. It doesn't mean I have to do I don't have to reconcile with them if they're nuts or crazy or whatever. It just means I'm not going to let that control me. I think forgiveness is where we set the most, I have it written right here. I had this note because I was sharing it with a young lady that I do counseling for. And I said, the Lord just showed me, he said, forgiveness sets the ultimate boundary because it's an internal boundary. And forgiveness says, I will not let what happened control me. I will not let what happened that was painful decide how I live from now on. And so forgiveness sets those internal boundaries to go, I will not treat you the way you treated me. I will not treat other people the way you treated me. I let that go. Forgiveness is like, to me, it's like a leash. Unforgiveness is like a leash. Dishonor and unforgiveness to me are they're buddies. They travel in packs. And so if I have a leash around a dog, I decide where the dog goes. That dog cannot go where I don't allow it to go because I have the leash around its neck. And if it tries to go, it gets choked until it obeys and listens to me. And that's what unforgiveness does, is it puts a leash around us, and those painful situations get to control where we go from now on. And so forgiveness goes, hey, let me actually take this leash off. And I'm setting a boundary with that painful experience, and I am going to decide what I do from now on, not that situation. And so to me, forgiveness is the first step towards actually honoring our parents and going, I forgive you. I let that go. That will not control me. That will not decide how I proceed with my life anymore.
Dude, that's a powerful revelation. Because I think it applies to everyone, even if your parents were present, because no one had a perfect parent. Everyone probably has some pain. And it almost seems like what you're saying, and it's true, if we don't release and forgive, we're basically held and limited by the mistakes, failures, and shortcomings that we experienced as kids. And so I think like there's almost like an invitation from God through this revelation that if you have hurt and pain from the past, to be the parent he created you to be first requires you to let go and not hold against your parents where they failed, hurt you. Otherwise, you're deemed to repeat those failures over and over and again, even if you try to react opposite. You're gonna cause pain to your kids because you're not letting go of the pain that's inside your heart. So, man, that's powerful, bro. That's powerful.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking about when you were sharing that. It's like you're holding somebody hostage, but in the situation, you're both stuck in the same room. You're holding them hostage.
That's it.
But you're also in the same room with them, and you're not going anywhere either. So you're both you're kind of holding yourself hostage. It's kind of reciprocal. Anyway, it's the thought as you're sharing.
That's a good picture.
So I think
that's a great picture. Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of like if you're a dad out there and you're listening to this and you're like, man, I have not forgave. I haven't let go of things that hurt me. There's an opportunity, man, to redefine what fatherhood looks like by going back to the past and allowing Jesus to speak into that and release you of the chains or the collars, the leashes that held you back. And to step into something new with God. There's a lot of power in that. So, dude, thanks for sharing. That's so good.
Yeah.
Switching gears, I think one of the things that I see often is some dads kind of justify their they're physically present in the home as the kind of litmus test for being a good dad. You know, I was there for dinner every night. You know, I went to the baseball games. But you just released a new book that, you know, at the end of the episode, I want you to kind of share how people connect with you in that book. But when I read it, there was a quote you said that just really stuck out to me. You said, too many kids live in a home with parents, but also live as orphans. And I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, phew. I mean, the ultimate orphan is the devil himself. He was kicked out of heaven. So, and that's what he introduced to Eve in the garden. And then Adam was, don't go to God for this. You don't need God for right and wrong. You just do it on your own. And I think that's in essence kind of what the orphan spirit is and how people live as orphans. There's more to it than that, obviously, but at its essence, I think it's, I'm on my own, you know, I got to figure this out. I got to do this on my own. And here's what's really crazy to me is, you know, Jesus told the parable of the man with two sons, right? We call one of them the prodigal son, but he had the older son, which a lot of us know, the older son that worked in the field. So you got this dad with two sons. And in the story, Jesus is not talking about just any dad. He's talking about God. And if you pay attention real close to both the sons, they live with the perfect father because they're in the home of God. They're raised up with God. But both of them are living like orphans. You got the one that's like, just give me my money that belongs to me when you die, and I'm out. I'm going to go blow it and ruin my life. I'm out. I do not want you in my life. And he's obviously living like an orphan. Then you got the older brother who's like, I'm still living in the house. I'm working really hard. I'm doing all the stuff, but I don't actually have the relationship. Like, where's my party? Where's my time? Hey, everything I have is yours. And so you got both of them. They have different manifestations, but both of them are living like orphans, even though they have the perfect father. And so I think it's just something to be aware of is the devil wants people to live as if they are all on their own. It's all up to them. There's no support. There's no help. They got to figure this out. And you know, just because you're at the baseball game and just because you're home doesn't mean you're fully engaged and fully present with your kids. Your body might be there. Where's your heart? And do your kids know that you're there for them? And that's, I mean, I think we're going to get into this in our next question, but one of the ways that people are stable in their identity is to know that I have someone there for me. I am not alone. Identity is not formed on its own, all by itself. It's formed with knowing someone is here for me. That's why teenagers, a lot of times they grow up, they become teenagers and they get the only people that they feel like are really there for them are their friends. So who's the ones providing their identity? Their friends. It's no longer their parents, it's their friends. And a lot of times as parents, we just yield to that and we just surrender that. And we go, you know what? Their friends are there for them. But that's where our kids get a deep sense of identity. And unfortunately, it's not coming from the parents. And so it can quickly move into orphan land, living like an orphan, even though you come home, you have a roof over your head, you got two parents in your home. It doesn't mean the spirit that's influencing you is the father, is God's spirit. You can live in a home and still be under the influence, the mindsets, the beliefs of an orphan because you're getting your identity from the wrong place, or you do feel like you are all on your own. Your parents aren't providing that for you. And so, yeah, I think we just want to be aware. We want to be aware that our kids are living like sons and daughters, not like orphans, even though we're there, even though they're with us. Yeah, it's one of those things. We could probably talk for a long time on that and unpack it more. I'm trying to keep it like as brief as possible, but as also like there's a lot to this. But that's, I think in at its core, that's what the enemy would love, is people to live in a home but not access just do it on their own, not access what's available to them. who's available to them.
Would you say that like independence is a sign like of an orphan spirit in a kid when they separate themselves from their parents, like you said, want to do it on their own? Is that a sign? Is there other signs that kind of show, man, my kid's maybe doesn't feel like I'm present, doesn't feel like I care? Like how do parents recognize that? Because that does happen a lot in the teenage years. It almost like a switch seems to flip, even though there's probably been something lying dormant in their heart much longer, and now it's manifesting. So, how do you recognize that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one. Like we weren't created to be independent. We also weren't created to be codependent. We weren't created to be dependent. We were created to be interdependent. Like we actually help each other and serve each other and love each other and support each other. Like, so yeah, independence, full on independence is a sign. You know, I think what happens a lot of times is the parents have created a culture of control. Since their kids were very young, they've done a lot of their children's thinking for them. They've made decisions for them. They've told them what's right and wrong, not that let them discover it. And so parents have accidentally, in the name of protecting our kids, in the name of training up our children in the way they should go, in the name of all of that, we accidentally create a culture of control. And at some point, kids are like, I want control of my own life. I want to make some decisions. But if there's a culture of control, not influence, then kids have a tendency to resist and to react and go, I'm going to do this on my own. And influence to me is totally different. You know, influence is where that interdependence comes from, where my kids, you know, my daughter can say something like, hey, I got this new friend. Can we talk about this new friend? Or they get older and they're like, I'm thinking about buying this car. What do you think about this car? That's them going, I don't want to do this on my own. I want your help. I want your input. I want your insight. Hey, will you come and help me with my homework? Like, I love the relationship right now I have with my daughter. She's 12. She's in puberty. All that's there. And me and her are so connected. And anytime she goes, Daddy, will you come read to me? I'm like, yes. Daddy, will you come help me with my schoolwork? Yes. Now, I'm not going to do it for her. I'm going to do it with her. I'm going to help her think. I'm trying to live in influence land so she will continue to invite my influence. If I control her and do all her thinking for her and do everything for her, eventually she's like, you don't think I'm capable. You don't think I can handle this. You don't think I know what I'm doing. And that's where we get a lot of that pushback from. And kids are going, I need independence. Here's another thing that can help a lot of parents in this is 2-year-olds and teenagers are the exact same, except one has body hair. And so whatever when the 2-year-old is going, when the 2-year-old is saying, no, I can do this. Cool. Yeah, go for it. A lot of times parents resist that and they push in and they control their kids and they don't realize they're building something towards when they're teenagers, and the kids are like, no, I can do this. And the parents are like, no, you can't. Right. And that's where the kids resist. So all of that to say, I'm trying to get back to what you actually asked. All of that to say, I think, yeah, independence is a massive sign of that. But where does independence come from? A lot of times it comes from, I've accidentally created a culture where I control my kids. They don't control themselves, and they don't want my influence because they think I'm going to try to control them. So they resist and move into independence rather than stay in that interdependence, asking for help, looking for help, wow, and doing the journey together, not alone. I don't know if that even fully answers it. Yes, independence is a huge sign. But it's also
I like going down that rabbit trail with you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it points back to what's the culture I've created in my home. A parent, a lot of times Christian parents think it's their job to control their kids. We say things like God's in control. God's in control, so I'm supposed to be in control, and I'm supposed to make sure you make all the right choices and you do all the right things and you know everything you're supposed to do, and I'm going to protect you from anything else. Except God, when he set up the garden, He didn't remove the bad options. He did not remove them. He did not put them somewhere else. He did not take the tree and hide it from them. Yeah. He actually allowed them to make the choice he did not want them to make. Why? He wanted influence, not control. And they still went off. They still made a poor choice. But that's in essence what God is going for. Like, think about this. If a fruit of the Holy Spirit is self-control, a lot of times we interpret that to be God control. So God, control me. God, tell me what to do. God, control me. Like, well, as soon as you give him, as soon as you give your life to him, he's like, now I can give you the ability to control yourself. And so I think when parents create a culture of control, they actually violate what the Holy Spirit's attempting to grow in their kids' lives. Because the Lord is not like, okay, now I get to control you. He's like, no, now you get to control you. I'll influence you, but you get to make decisions. Your will is now free to make decisions that sin wouldn't let you make on your own before. Now you're free, and I'll influence you. I'll tell you what I want you to do or not want to do, but ultimately you get to choose, and you get to reap the consequences of those choices and learn from those choices. And we see that in the garden where God goes, don't eat that tree, but I'll leave the tree there, and I'll leave the snake there to talk to you about the tree and deceive you about the tree. Why? Because I want to influence you, not control you. And then you go, oh, that was real dumb. I should probably do this with God now. And I should probably ask for his input. And I should probably listen to him now because I didn't before and that was dumb. And I think that's where, I'm totally rabbit trailing now. But independence typically comes from, I've accidentally created control, not influence. Right. And my kids want to do it on their own. They don't want my input anymore.
Right. And some parents, I think, celebrate the fruit of control as good parenting.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, like this is what I like to say sometimes. Like, we think well-behaved kids mean everything's good. And it doesn't. Like, well-behaved kids could be because they're scared to death of you.
Right.
They're so scared of you. And that's not good. Like, well, why do your kids behave so good? Because they are so scared that I'm going to hurt them, that I'm going to punish them, that I'm going to, they're so afraid of me. It's like, well, Jesus said, if you love me, you'll obey me. So obedience is a fruit of love. Godly obedience is a fruit of love. But that doesn't mean, you can't obey from a different motive. Like Jesus said, love for me will bear fruit in obedience. But some kids, it's not love that drove them to obedience. It's fear that drove them to obedience. It's like, wow, it's not my kid's behavior that decides whether or not I'm a good parent. It's why are they behaving? It's what's driving these decisions, And are they afraid I'm going to hurt them, or are they afraid they're going to hurt me? Because if they're going, nah, I don't want to make that decision, that would hurt my relationship with my parents. That's good. That's what you want. You want them protecting your heart because your hearts are connected, rather than you have them protecting themselves from you because your hearts aren't connected and they're so afraid of you. There's no love, there's just fear.
Right. And then you see those kids,
going,
you see those kids when they graduate high school and go off to college go crazy because they're finally in a position to make some choices for themselves. But
and
the
they
parents
never really
all along
learned
have
how
been
to.
patted. Right. Because they're finally given some choices, and they're choosing all the wrong ones just to gain some sense of self-control. So, man, there's a lot of power in that. I feel like the foundation of what you're saying is really relationship. That if we don't establish a deep, healthy relationship with our kids, then they might behave in a season, but there's not a long-term connection where our kids want to be close to us. They're just trying to stop from getting in trouble, is really what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's powerful, dude. That's powerful.
Come on. Good.
Man, so good.
A lot of mic drop moments. I'm just like, he's just so gently throwing grenades everywhere. My name is Seth. Here you go. Boom, boom. Just like, wow. No, it's good stuff.
Come on.
Yeah. Wow.
I like it. This is the stuff. I love this stuff. I love looking at all this so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think about it in the garden. This is what's crazy to me is, like, I think a lot of parents accidentally feed their kids from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil instead of feed their kids from the tree of life. And that was the one thing we were never supposed to do to begin with. And that whole thing, moving away from relationship and just right and wrong, do what I tell you, without relationship, do what I say, this is right, this is wrong, do it, do what I tell you. It's like, oh, we're actually going, here, check this fruit out. I know the difference between right and wrong. I don't need God. I'll tell you right and wrong. I'll tell you good from evil without God and without, like, wow, that's the temptation. Eat from the tree of to know the difference between good and evil, but eliminate God from the equation. And that's it. It's like, wait, I don't want you to just know. I don't want right and wrong only. I want relationship. I want to do this together. I want to do this with God and with each other, not just do what I tell you because it's right or it's wrong, but let's learn that together in relationship. Yeah, that's, to me, that's where you see I move away from relationship and I move into just doing what I'm told, no matter why you're telling me or any of that.
Yeah.
So the content, that's great. I want to ask another question. So how do we, help our kids understand, like, and embrace who they truly are in a world that's really trying to, like, kind of hijack their identity? Like, how do we help our children, for the fathers that are listening and the parents that are listening, right? There's a world that's totally, against what we're trying to instill. So how do we help help parents help their kids truly embrace their identity in a world that's trying to hijack it? What would you say?
I think it's a huge question. I mean, one thing would be, do I actually know who he says they are? Would be one thing to look at. Do I know who God says my kids are? And can I begin to raise them in that so they know? It's like sometimes we just don't know who they are. It's like it's really hard to raise a kid to live out who they are when we don't know, and if they don't know either. And so I would say, start with looking at asking God and looking at what the hints they're dropping that communicates this is who I actually am. I also think it's really important to, identity also comes from the other thing I mentioned before, like, is someone going to be there for me? Who's there for me? Because that's going to be where I get my source of identity. And am I good enough is also some things that instill identity and enforce identity in a kid, is to know I am good enough for this person. Whoever I think I'm good enough for, that's where I'll get my identity from, right? So a lot of times kids grow up and they think no matter what I do, it's not good enough for my parents. No matter what I do, it's not good enough for my dad, not good enough for my mom. No matter how hard I try, it's not good enough. And then they start going to their friends, and their friends got the same pain and the same trauma. And they're like, well, you got the same issues as me. Why don't we rally around our trauma and get together around our trauma and our pain? And I'm good enough for you because we're in the same pain. Well, now that friend is becoming the source of identity because the kid is moving away from their parents, not feeling good enough. And then that friend is there for them, and now they're getting all their identity from their friends instead of their family. And so those are two things to pay attention to, is to go, do my kids know that they're good enough for me? Even when they mess up, do they know that they, as a person, maybe their behavior is not something I want, but do they know I am actually good enough for my parents? And do they know I'm actually there for them? Because that, someone else is going to answer those loud and clear, whether it's the internet, whether it's somebody on social media, whether it's a friend at school, whatever, a person with the same kind of pain as them. So good enough and who's there for me is a huge source. So making sure that they can answer those questions from us is huge. Knowing who God says they are is huge. Paying attention to the tips they drop, the hints they're dropping along their lives, going, this is who I am, this is who I am. I'm a firm believer that kids don't live their lives at first thinking about what job's going to give me the best benefits and pay me the most money. They're thinking, what do I enjoy? What do I love? What's fun? What's right? So kids will drop these hints. They'll say, here's what I want to be when I grow up. Like, oh, if you tell me what you want to be when you grow up, you're already telling me who you are. You're like, you want to be I want to be a doctor. I'm like, wow. Okay. You're giving me, you're not thinking necessarily money. You're not going, kids don't go, I want to be a doctor. A 5-year-old doesn't go, I want to be a doctor because they make a lot of money. 5-year-old's going, I want to be a doctor because something inside me wants to heal and wants to restore and wants to repair and wants to help and wants to take care of people and wants to take broken things and make them better. I'm like, oh, you're telling me who you are. You're not just telling me the job you want to do, you're telling me who they are. So watching for those hints, I also think as a father or mother, if moms listen at all, as a parent now, I think it's really important that we get this, that sometimes, not always, sometimes the best protection for our kids is preparation. And so I don't hide hard conversations from my children. I shelter them enough so that I can be in charge of certain conversations, right? But I don't shy away from them. I just want to be the one in charge and leading the conversations, right? So I think it's super important. Like, many times me and my kids have talked about gender. Many times me and my kids have talked about sex. Many times me and my kids have talked about porn. Many times me and my kids have talked about New Age, has talked about witchcraft, has talked about occult. Many times we've talked about the media and how they're trying to confuse people. Over and over. I've talked about this over and over. But I will filter that stuff for them. I will interpret things for them. But I think it's important. I'm preparing you for a world that's going to throw this at you hard. I am going to buffer it. I'm going to interpret it. I'm going to filter it. I'm not going to keep you away from it. Now, I will keep you away from it. Like, I'll just be honest. I would not put my kid in a public school where I live right now, because where I live, the agenda of the public school is to get my kids to question their identity at its deepest core. And so I will go, let me pull you out of there. Let me shelter you from that. It doesn't mean we're never going to have those conversations. It means I will lead the conversation, not the school.
Right.
I will guide the conversation, not the school. I will interpret the conversation, not the teacher. And so I think that's huge. I want to protect my kids' identity. I need to actually prepare them. If I do shelter them, it's to figure out how to not shelter them and how to introduce them to these types of things in a way that's healthy. Yep. And in a way that's coming through our lens, our interpretation, our belief, why we believe this, why we think this. It's super simple living on a farm. Not simple, but I have a lot of opportunity. It's like, man, my boy puppy is humping everything right now. It's like, wow, you see his penis? You see his penis? You see how hard it is and how long it is? You see that? Like, you see him humping? Like, okay, and we talk about this stuff. So we've talked about sex. Wow, why is the rooster pecking the back of the hen's head, standing on top of her, bouncing her up and down? Oh, okay, well, so we've had these conversations over and over. But when a new animal, when a new animal is born, I'll just lay it out there. When a new animal is born, it's like, well, is it a boy or a girl? Well, does it have balls? Or not? Because that's how you know. And we're like, well, there's balls. That's a bull. That's a bull. How do you know that's a bull? Because he's got a sack. And if he doesn't have it, he's a girl, right? So my kids grow up with this thing of so we've talked about gender. We've talked about all the stuff. We've talked about everything that is going on out there. I'm the one leading the conversation and guiding it, because the best protection for my kids is for me to prepare them for what's actually out there and interpret it for them and guide them in it, not let someone else guide it. I think if we get afraid, now we delegate that conversation to be led by someone else. Yep. And now we could find ourselves in trouble. It doesn't mean everything is going to be perfect and everything is going to be grand and everything's never going to be challenged. Like, no, but at least we've had the conversations, and that's a huge thing. So in parenting and all of life, it's really important to understand the first thing you learn about something is what you believe to be true. It's true theologically. It's true in all areas of life. So if I am the one to talk about sex, gender, identity, all of it, if I'm the first one to talk, that's what my kids think is true. Think about this. Like, it's cool that we're all on here, and like, Jermaine, you're a black guy, African American. Nathan, you're white, I'm white. Like, we're having this conversation, right? There's, unfortunately, in our country, a lot of white parents a long time ago in the South told their kids their race was better than the black race. And like, well, that's a horrible lie. That's a lie. That's ridiculous. That's nonsense. That's stupid. Here's the problem. Their parent told them first. So the kid believes it to be true. So then someone else comes along and goes, hey, that's not true. And the kids are now defending what their parents told them because their parents told them first. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to offend anybody or hurt them, but I'm going, parents who talk first position their kids to believe something true. And if I tell my kids lies, or if I let someone else talk first, if someone else talks about sex first before me, then when I come and talk about sex, now I'm the one that they think is not telling the truth because their truth is already established because it was spoken to first. If I tell my kids, hey, all men are created equal. All men are created equal. All women are created equal. Men are not better than women. One race is not better. Like if I put that in my kids first, then someone comes and brings this nonsense their direction. My kids are like, well, that's stupid. Yeah, because I talked first. And so you can see it with lies. People teach their kids lies, but their kids think it's true because it's what they learned first. So we want to make sure we're telling our kids the truth first, so that when society comes up, now they have to fight against us, not us fight against them. Hopefully that all made sense in a loving way, in a good way.
It does.
These are topics I think are really important. Like, how do we grow up with a bunch of racist people? Because someone told them that. It's a total lie, but someone told them that garbage. How do we grow up with men thinking they're better than women? Someone told them lie. Why do we have a bunch of girls growing up thinking men are horrible? Because someone told them a lie. And so it's like, if I can tell them the truth first, the lies have to fight against the actual truth, not just the truth fighting against the actual lies that the kids think are true.
That's so good, man.
That is good.
I feel like I'm just whipping it now.
I think you're basically like speaking to the role of a father to give his sons and daughters identity. Obviously moms do that too, but there is a critical mandate on us to speak to things. I mean, it would be nice if we could all take tours on your farm and you could show us around the animals and help us, facilitate some of those sexual conversations,
I'm sorry, I was laughing earlier. He was talking very end to the chicken. I was just in my head and saw the rooster. I was cracking out.
But it's so good. But it's so good. It's so good because the point you're trying to make is that you're saying it is my role as a father to have every conversation with my kids, because I think a lot of parents shy away from awkward conversations, and they do by default allow someone else to define for their kids' reality. And I think that's why so many kids have gender identity issues, because parents didn't actually take that role in responses. So I think what you're saying is really powerful. As our role as parents to really speak into our kids' identity and to speak into it early and often is kind of what you're saying. I don't have one conversation about sex. I don't have one conversation about gender. I have continuing conversations that are age appropriate as I deem them mature enough to handle deeper levels of that conversation, right? Isn't that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely, because the culture is trying to talk about it in not age appropriate ways, for sure. Yes. Multiple conversations over and over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So when you came, you talked about this subject, and it's really changed the way I've looked at correction in general. Like, how do I correct my kids' behavior? Obviously, as parents, we all want kids that don't turn out to be criminals, that respect the law and are good citizens and have good behavior and don't get in trouble at school. But you talked about the concept of discipline versus punishment, and the way you talked about it was so transformational for me. I remember reading about it in the book too, because the way I was raised was discipline or punishment, whatever word you want to use, the goal was to get me to get in line and behave a certain way. And it didn't go any deeper than that. So whatever worked to accomplish a goal of getting me in line is what worked, right? So it involved a lot of belts. It involved a lot of punishment, right? Getting in trouble, which I think my parents did the best. But obviously, what you shared was really, really countercultural. And it felt like, to me, the heart of God. And so would you talk about that a little bit? Like, what is the difference between discipline and punishment, and why should parents move away from a punishment mentality and embrace discipline as a way to correct and help their kids grow in self-discipline?
Yeah, I think this is another, I mean, all of these we could probably talk about for a really long time, but yeah, so, as you were talking, I was just thinking, like, we usually punish our kids because we think it's our job to just get them to obey. Just do what I say and get them to obey. And over the last few years, the last 6 years particularly, I've realized how important it is not to communicate to our kids, just obey. If you're a Democrat and Trump was in office, you did not want to obey anything he said. And if you're a Republican and Biden was in office and all the stuff with the pandemic, you do not want to obey. So I actually want to, in my world, I'm going, wow, I don't want to raise kids that just obey people because they're in authority. I want them to be able to think. I want them to be able to reason. I want them to be able to look and go, just because you're telling me to do something doesn't mean I want to do it. Now, that needs to be done in a healthy way, but that's where punishment comes in, is we think it's our job to get them just to obey. And we talked about that briefly earlier. But so punishment is like, you mess up, I'm gonna whatever. It can be spanking, it can be grounding, it can be anything. I think so. We have a lot of tools that we give parents to use, but even the tools that we provide can be used wrong. I think you can spank your kids and it be from discipline. I think you can also spank your kids and it come from punishment. I think you can sit your kids in a timeout and it comes from discipline, or you can sit them in a timeout and it comes from punishment. To me, it's not necessarily the tool that we use or what we do, it's why and how we do it. And so if I think it's my goal to get obedience, then I will introduce fear and punishment into their lives to get them to do the right thing no matter what. If I think it's my job to get their cooperation and to get godly obedience, then I will let them mess up. I will let them make mistakes. The goal for me of punishment is do what I say. The goal of discipline is to go, I'll let you learn this the hard way, so you learn why to obey and why to make that choice. For example, I'll try to give an example. Like my kids, if they are playing outside, right, and it's bedtime, and I'm like, hey guys, time to come in and brush your teeth and get ready for bed. Do I want them to listen? Absolutely. Do I want them to come in and brush their teeth and get ready for bed? Absolutely. Do I want them to come in right this minute? Do I want them to drop what they're doing and come inside and get ready for bed, because I want to go to bed too in a little bit? And so I want them to do that. But let's say my kids are out there and they're like, they just want to keep playing. So they're not coming in. They're not obeying. They're not listening. Punishment would go, if you don't get in here, you're in a lot of trouble. If you don't get it, you need to get in here now or you're in trouble. When I discipline my kids in that situation, I'll go, hey, it's time for bed. Time to brush your teeth and get ready for bed. If you don't come in now, it's not a problem. No problem for me. Might be a problem for you. I'm okay if you don't do what I tell you to do, because now I'm giving you hassle time. This is now a hassle for me. You know it's bedtime, you know it's time to brush your teeth, and you're not coming in. No sweat, no problem. Go ahead and do what I don't want you to do. Hassle time is running. So I'll keep track of it. I'll go out there and say, hey guys, you're at 3 minutes, because I'm not just trying to drop it on them and surprise them. I want them to know where they're at so they can make a good decision for themselves. Hey guys, you're at 3 minutes. It's bedtime. You got 3 minutes of hassle time. If you don't want to come in, no sweat, the timer will keep running. Oh, now you're at 5 minutes. Hey guys, now you're at 10 minutes, right? So I will allow them to do what I don't want them to do, because I have a consequence ready for them that I will let the consequence teach them. And I will create a consequence that's very similar to real life as much as I possibly can. So let's say my kids stay outside for 10 minutes and then they come in and like, hey guys, you didn't come in right away. It's not a problem, but now you have 10 minutes of hassle time, right? So tomorrow happens to be family movie night. We're going to watch a movie, and we're going to sit down. We got popcorn. We're going to enjoy a movie in front of the TV. but you owe me 10 minutes of hassle time. So we're going to start the movie. You go sit over there in the kitchen for 10 minutes. And as soon as your 10 minutes is up, then you can come in and watch the movie. And so now what's happening is I let you do. I wasn't just pursuing obedience. I wasn't going to punish you if you do it. I'm going to let you have a consequence for what you did. I'm disciplining you. I want you to think about what you did, and I want you to think about what to do next time. So the goal for me is I want you to actually figure this out for yourself, not me have to do it all for you. So, sorry, I'm trying to tell the story and give as much input as at the same time. But so what happens is I'm okay if you don't do what I told you. I will give you that consequence, the hassle time. You will pay it back, and now it's a hassle for you. And you'll go, man, that was the most miserable 10 minutes of my life. I could hear the movie playing. You guys are eating the popcorn. I'm sitting over here, and after 10 minutes, I get to come eat my popcorn. Now, the next day, right, when you say, hey, guys, it's time to come in and brush your teeth and go to bed, and they don't come in right away. Hey, no problem for me. Might be a problem for you. Hassle time is running, right? Now they go, do I want to rack up very much hassle time? Because I'm going to have to pay this back. And now what are they doing? They're the ones making the decision for themselves. Do I want to listen to what my parents said? Do I want to do what my parents said? Oh, I don't want hassle time. That's a consequence I don't enjoy. So I'm going to go in right now and I'm going to brush my teeth and get ready for bed. Well, what happened? I let them have a consequence. I disciplined them. I didn't punish them. Punishment would force them to come in and do what you said, no matter what. Discipline goes, I'll let you do what I don't want you to do, but I'll also let you have the consequence for it. For example, one time this happened to my son on the way to Legoland. We were driving there. My kid got 17 minutes of hassle time on the way to Legoland, and so he had to pay it back there. Right, so I let him have 7 minutes. I think I told you guys this. You started this story before. I said, buddy, do you want to pay? When we get to Legoland, I said, buddy, do you want to pay all of it back tomorrow when we go into Legoland, or do you want to pay it back tonight, some tomorrow? He goes, some tonight, some tomorrow. I said, all right, we're going to go to the pool. So how about you do this? You pay 7 minutes back tonight at the pool, 10 minutes back tomorrow. Okay, so we get to the pool. He's sitting in a chair while all of us are swimming for 7 minutes, and it feels like an eternity. And when 7 minutes is over, he jumps in the pool, he swims, great. He had to pay him back what he took from me. And then the next morning, we were walking into Legoland. It's like, and we got the back pass. We had the passes to get in before other people, right? So, and we could go in the back entrance. So we go in, I'm like, buddy, you got 10 minutes of hassle time. Do you want to sit over there by yourself for 10 minutes, or do you want me to sit with you? Because I'm not trying to punish him. I will join him in his consequence if he wants it. I'll, like God joined us in all of our consequences and took them on our behalf. I'll take it with him, and I'll sit there with him. He goes, Dad, I want you to sit with me. I'm like, all right. So we sit there for 10 minutes, and hundreds of children are beginning to come in this back entrance, and they're starting to come in the front entrance too. And he can hear kids riding rides, playing, having fun. He can hear it all. He's watching them come in this entrance there too. All the kids from the back entrance. And I'm telling you what, it was this. He thought the 7 minutes was long. 10 minutes was way worse. And so I could have told him. He was yelling in the back of the car for 17 minutes. He's yelling and screaming. I could have told him, stop yelling. Instead, I was going, buddy, go ahead and yell. It's all a hassle. You can yell if you want. It's all a hassle. Well, then, that 10 minutes, right, is so long for him. He finally gets to go play. For 6 months, if he heard me say, it's okay, not a problem, but it is a hassle, I couldn't even finish the word hassle, and he would run and do whatever it was I was asking him to do, because he knew my dad will let me pay back whatever it is that however long I do this, he'll have me pay it back, and I don't like paying it back. That is a consequence I do not like. So now I will listen when my dad says he doesn't want me to do something. Now I'll listen to him because I allowed him to have the consequence. That was a long way to say punishment will just make you do right and wrong, right instead of wrong. Discipline will allow you to do wrong and learn why it's wrong and learn why to do right, and allow you to learn to think for yourself and figure this out for yourself. Yeah. And so that's it. I think I think punishment, one way to recognize, because like I said at the beginning, you can have the same tool and you could still use it to punish your kids instead of discipline your kids. I think one way to recognize the difference is to check your own heart in the middle. Am I using fear and anger to get them to do what I want? Because I could go outside and go, this is a hassle, you're going to have to pay it back, you should come in right now because this is a hassle and you're going to miss your movie night or you're going to miss Legoland. Like, oh, well, I'm using the tool, but I'm doing it in a way to force you to do what I want, not allow you to learn this for yourself. And so if I've got anger and fear raging inside me to try to get them to do what I want, I'm punishing them, not disciplining them. If I've got peace in there going, I'm cool if you don't listen to me, because I know this is going to be, you are going to figure this out tomorrow at movie night or tomorrow at Legoland. You are going to learn for yourself. It's kind of like going, my kid didn't want to do his homework last night. I'm like, well, I could force him to do his homework. I said, buddy, hey, we're all here for you. Mom would help you. I'll help you. We can turn it in tonight online. We can turn it in if you want. We'll help you. We'll get it in there. And he didn't want to. I'm like, okay. So now he has a 0, and he's going to have a 0 now. And I'm going to let him reap the consequence of that. Sorry, this is 3 stories in one. But like this, if I'm mad and using fear to get him to do what I want, no matter the tool I use, it's punishment. If I'm peaceful and going, cool, but it's going to be a bummer if you get a 0 when you didn't have to, man, I'm so bummed for you to get a 0, but I'll let you get it because then you'll learn. Maybe I should just do my homework and turn it in. It was all ready. All I had to do was upload it. So that's the difference.
No, dude, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I think it's kind of like that internal, like litmus test for us as parents is, are we doing this from retribution to pay our kids back for what they did to us because we're angry? Punishment. Are we doing it for their development and their good, even if it's more inconvenient for us? I think that's discipline, because ultimately I think that's one of the things you say in the book over and over again. The goal is not to control your kids, but to create a spirit of self-discipline, so when you're not around, your kids still make the right choices because you've taught them the power of good and bad consequences. So I think there's just so much good out of that. I mean, I think that's one of the things that even for me as a dad, I'm thinking like, that's something I have to learn, because there's moments where their fear comes in and says, man, if I let them choose, they're going to choose poorly and it's going to hurt them, and you don't want to see your kids get hurt. But what if it's possible that actually that's the thing that teaches them and saves them from much greater pain later in life? So, man, I think there's some really strong encouragements there. I think, man, there's so many good takeaways, right, Jermaine? I mean, there's so many good things we could take away.
I was just like, part 2, part 3.
Yeah.
And what I think you say the name of the book. You guys mentioned the book. What's the name of the book for our listeners? You're referring to, Nate?
The one,
Seth,
I think one of the ones.
Well, Seth's
Nathan,
written 3 books.
About.
They're all killer. I don't know if you want to share just.
Yeah, sure. The one Nathan was talking about first is called Raising Spirit-Led Kids. Before that, we wrote one called Win-Win Parents, but someone else had the copyright, so it's now Win-Win Families. And then I just wrote another one. It just came out 2 weeks ago, called Designing God's Dream Home. That one is a very short book. It is, you can read it in less than 2 hours. It's designed, now each chapter has like 31 chapters, I think. Each chapter is to go, here's a mindset, here's why this mindset's important, and here's what it will cost you if you don't have this in your life. And here's an activation you can do today, right now, that will actually help you. So that's the brand new one. It's a short read. It's only on Kindle right now. It was actually doing really good. It was number 1 in like 7 categories on Kindle. The paperback's coming out probably next week. The first one's on its way to me right now. But we release it on Kindle first. And it's just designed to go, here's some mindsets. Here's what this will cost you. And here's how to do it. Here is how to do this right now in your home. At least get a little taste of how to do it. So, that's the new one. And it's got a lot of good
sneak
feedback.
Peek. It's phenomenal. Yeah, I read the book. It was really, really good. Seth, how do people connect with you? Is there any like resources or specific things you're really honing in on right now that you want people to connect to?
Yeah, I would say that book, go get that one. it's only $1.99 on Kindle, so you can just grab it real fast and have it on your phone. I would go for that one. We are in the middle of, we at my website, you can find pretty much everything. It's just my name, SethDahl.com, but we are moving that more to be spirit-led families. So in there is a network that I have. It's like Facebook. It's like a Facebook group. It's just not on Facebook. It's on Mighty Networks. But that can all be found and on SethDahl.com. It can lead you that direction, and or the shop. Yeah, I would go SethDahl.com and then shop, and you can find the network. You can find that community, and you can find tons of resources on there. But that one on Kindle, Designing God's Dream Home, I'd go for that first.
Yeah. And you're on Instagram, right? So there's a lot of ways for people to connect to you as well on social media. Yeah, I would really encourage you guys connect to what Seth's doing. I think it's phenomenal. It's really going to equip you as a parent. It's made a big difference for me and Christina as parents. And so, dude, thank you so much for being with us. This was absolute gold. Phenomenal, Seth. Really, really, really. So thank you for being with us all the way from Texas, down in Austin, Texas, man. We appreciate you.
Come on.
And thank you guys for hanging out with us, man. We appreciate you guys being a part of the podcast, listening, subscribing, sharing. We hope this encourages you to be the best version that God's created to be as a father or single mom, whatever you're doing. We just want to cheer you on and tell you, man, you're doing an incredible job. Keep going. You are our hero. So we appreciate you guys. Keep up the great work, and we will see you next time on all podcast platforms. Peace out.
Peace.